Welcome to In Her Words. We hope that you finished the latest season of the morning show because we have a treat for you today. Lauren Neustadter, who's president of film and television at Hello Sunshine, award-winning director Mimi Leader, and writer Charlotte Stoudt are responsible for this past season, and we know everyone has loved it. We get to sit down with these three amazing, accomplished women and hear how they work together for this season and what they have in store for us next. We hope you enjoy.
Well, y'all, we're so excited for you to be here. Obviously you are in season 3. So how has this season been for you all? Where should we start?
I mean,
it's reflecting upon season 3 right now.
It's a miracle that tomorrow is, or in a couple of days, is the finale. Like it's it takes you. It's such a labor of love, and you work on it for so long, and you talk about like, what if they went to space? And these things are just early ideas. I just have a vivid memory of sitting with Mimi on the Sony lot, talking about space and how we were going to do it, and Mimi getting very, very excited. And now here we are, and it's the finale.
Here we are.
And I was sitting there going, I really like this woman. She's, Charlotte came in and created a brilliant third season with her merry band of writers. She, came in with fresh eyes and I think really brought an energy and a synergy to the show that we'd had a great first 2 seasons, but this season took a big leap forward, a big leap in storytelling. And it was really great to bring it to life together, all of us.
It was also really amazing. I mean, I will say, as you guys said, here we are coming up on the finale of the 3rd season, but what a brave thing of Charlotte to come in and really sort of, have this vision for it and lead us so gracefully and so beautifully. I feel like, Charlotte, you were meant to be with this group, and we sort of knew it. It was love at first meeting, I think, for all
love
of us.
Love at first Zoom.
But you so astutely observed that each of the previous 2 seasons had really been about something, and that in this 3rd season you wanted to explore the subjectivity of the truth and what the truth would mean for each of the characters. And just as the truth is entirely subjective in the world that we live in, so too is it in the world of the morning show and of these characters. And I think you did so many beautiful things, in the writer's room that Mimi referenced. You just hired such brilliant people to come and help weave all of these stories so intricately. But, I think a real testament, Charlotte, to you. And I'm so happy you get to talk about your work now. I want Charlotte to get to talk the whole time.
Like, do you plan out how many seasons, or is it easier, or was it more fun when you're like, we're going to do another season, and it's going to be like brainstorming what you want that season to be in a new way? Or is it easier to say there's going to be 6 and this is the whole arc of the story?
I think you always want to, at least per season, you want it to be satisfying, and the end of a certain story, even though the series could go on, you want to feel like you leave some threads, a little bit of cliffhanger, a little bit of what's going to happen, but also like you've had your satisfying meal, you've been on the journey. So I think TV writers tend to think, even if you go, oh, there are a lot more stories to tell, you want to make sure every season has its own kind of integrity and emotional satisfaction, because you never know what's going to happen, So you want to feel like by the finale, people went, okay, I've been on that ride, and it was a good one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and to go off of what Lauren was saying, the season's main theme was the truth. What is your truth? What is the truth? Truth being such an endangered species these days. And each character had a challenge in terms of what their truth is. And I think beautifully woven and brought to fruition in the finale that is airing in a couple of days, in terms of, will our characters have the integrity we hope that they do have? Will they follow through? Are they the people we think they are? You know, and there's, you know, is there some disappointment? Is there a sigh of relief? And, you know, that's good storytelling when you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you're hoping for it, whatever it is.
Well, it made them so real because none of them, they could have so easily been caricatures of people we know in our real lives or you know, reporters, but they all became so real, good, bad, and ugly. They really could relate to, we could relate to them in their personal life, in their professional life, and how they can be, you know, how they could be real people.
I think that's one of the things that really attracted me about coming to work on the show, because the original DNA of the show is so strong. I love that it's about, you know, women's agency, women's autonomy, and it gets down to literally our physical autonomy, whether it's a consent issue of consent with sexual misconduct or reproductive rights, you know, with the whole Roe decision. I love that about it. And I love that these issues are sort of played out by these very flawed people. I think you said it perfectly, that you relate to these people more because they make mistakes, they misstep, they mess up, they say the wrong thing. And we've all been in those situations where we've done that, or, you know, your spouse or your colleague has done that. And I love the show's messiness. I think that's one of its strengths.
What's the process in terms of working with the characters, or working, you know, obviously with the actresses, in terms of bringing those characters to light, or making those twists and turns? How are you bringing, you know, obviously the characters that you're writing are so in depth, in terms of making them so human, so flawed, but when you're working with the team holistically, what is that process like as you're writing these scenes, or as you're bringing, you know, these episodes to bear?
I think you always start, you know, when you begin a season, you always say, what are the emotional journeys of our characters? And even before you think like what's happening in the world, or like what is the A story, you always start, I think, regardless of show, drama, comedy, whatever, whether it's been running one season or 6, you know, what is the emotional journey this character needs to go on this year? And that then pulls you to story. Like what, you know, what adventure best places them in the test that they need to pass or struggle with. So we really always start there. And of course, there are conversations with Jen and Reese, you know, early on, you know, and just this track, because obviously Reese and Jen know these characters, you know, they've been living with them for so long, and I've stepped in. So it's partly my job to, you know, I can learn from them and get the good stuff from whether they think, you know, the pitch of the season resonates with them. And then of course we do that with all the actors, and they're so generous and thoughtful and truly extraordinary. Like, all the people will get a script, and the notes that we always get are smart. They make the scenes better or funnier, or more complex. And so it's my favorite thing to do, is just to collaborate and make the scenes better and make the story better. It's a thrill, you know, because you're just working with these incredible actors. I mean, they're extraordinary.
I also had the privilege of being in the room when we actually had the very, very first conversations about this show, when we were pitching it. And, you know, sitting in that room with Reese and with Jen was certainly surreal, but also really a testament to their involvement, you know, truly from the very, very beginning. When they read Top of the Morning, which of course was a nonfiction book by Brian Stelter that sort of inspired it. It was the spark that lit the flame for the show. But, you know, I will just say they are both so exceptional, so brilliant, so creative, and so deeply invested in the show. And, you know, from the very, very beginning, their hearts were connected to the characters that they were playing. And we were able to have such rich conversations about each of the characters, about all of the characters, about the world of the show, you know. And I remember when Mimi, you came into the conversation, you know, and it was like we were sort of instant family, and Charlotte, you know, the same. I just think it's been a lovely thing to work together and see the evolution of the world and the show and the beautiful characters.
Mimi, what attracted you to this? What was that like coming on to the morning show? What attracted you to the
Well,
script or
you know,
the
I
thesis?
well, I had signed on actually before there was a script. I had
Really?
dinner. I had worked with Michael Ellenberg when he was at HBO on a show called Luck, starring Dustin Hoffman and Dennis Farina and a whole bunch of brilliant actors. And he took me to dinner and he said, I've got this show, this book. I want you to read it. And Jen and Reese are attached. And I said, well, I love the Larry Sanders Show, and I love anything that is behind the scenes. I am so attracted to it, and it's the good stuff. And I said, yeah, I'm in. And I've never signed on to anything without reading a script. And I went off and directed on the basis of sex. When I came back, Lauren and Reese and Jen and Michael and Kristen had sold it. And so that's how I became involved. I knew I was going to be involved, but it was so interesting, having just read the book, to wonder, what will it be? Will these characters be messy and flawed and messed up and emotionally open and closed as characters? And I would say, just to add to the previous conversation, that Jen and Reese come to the set. They are brilliant actors, and they know their arcs, but they come on very fresh, as if they're there for the first time. Like, what scene are we in? And then we have to navigate and modulate how far we go with what we're putting out there emotionally and even intellectually. And it's just so fun. It's like a playground. It's like going into a candy store, and you get to eat your best, pick your best flavors, and they have all the flavors. And so it's just been really exciting to collaborate and create all this together and put it on its feet.
It's extraordinary.
Well, and I would just add to that. I think what's another thing so distinctive about the show is what we call it in the writer's room, the tonal slides within scenes, that you might start out in a very dramatic scene and then it becomes absurd. Or you might start off in a comic scene and then it suddenly does that sharp turn. And I just thought, I'm always going back and watching the pilot. And you're just that very, very sexy first shot of the screens, and then it pans and like chips on the floor, and you're like, is he dead? Am I in a conspiracy thriller? And his eyes are just like, I think I love the complexity of tone of the show, which I very much feel is like a Mimi, Karen, Reese and Jen creation, from episode 1. I think it's really delicious and seductive, because you actually never know when you go into a scene what it's going to be. It can always change, and there's that element of possible surprise, I think, is something the audience responds to.
Yeah.
Not
And
just what is someone going to say, but how's it going to feel suddenly?
And creating the pilot, directing the pilot, setting the tone, and doing a show that is a dramatic show with comedy. And every dramatic show that you do really has to have comedy to really work. And any comedy you do has to have a lot of drama in it. And finding that tone and walking that line, was really, really hard and fun to navigate, because we're stepping into the shoes. We haven't done it before. We're finding it together. And I guess I should go back and look at the pilot. But yeah, it's fun.
In terms of it's like the show captures the behind the scenes of the newsroom so well. What type of research went into making it so authentic? It's very tangible. It's very it's very real in terms of what was that process like building your newsroom?
Well, I would say cinematically, I went with our production designer John Pano to New York, and we walked the Today Show sets and the ABC.
Good Morning America.
And we looked at the color palettes that existed. We looked at the size of the rooms. It it was very interesting, the difference between the control room at the Today Show versus Good Morning America, and how the director at the Good Morning America would stand. You know, she was a woman and she was standing and just conducting. And then went to the Today Show, and there was a guy who was directing, and he was like sitting, and he had a whole other vibe. And it, you know, really was food for thought as to the director of the show. Who do you cast? What's the vibe? And, you know, the color palette really wanted to create what they have created when we wake up in the morning to these people who help us get through the day. We wanted it to be brightly lit and happy and lean in, and I can do anything today. And then as soon as they walk off stage, we see the messiness, we see the contrast, we see the saturation of colors, the complexity of these characters reflected in the camera work and the color palette. And we continued that with Nelson Coates in the second season. And I mean, to the wires in the ceiling, we built that onto our sets. Everything was very authentic. And the rooms actually are so small, the dressing rooms. And, you know, Pano was building these dressing rooms. And I'm going, I can't shoot in these dressing rooms. This is too small. Please just give me a few more feet. And so I can get the lenses in. And it was really challenging and really exciting to see the real thing and then create our reality.
Can I give just like a little bit of credit to Mimi Leader and her legendary oneers that I also think just, you know, when you're in New York and you are in those rooms, you feel the pace and the energy and the tension and the urgency and all of that. And I think, you know, certainly it is there on the page in our show, but we're so blessed to have Mimi and such extraordinary directors that are really bringing these stories to life, and through the language of the camera and through the attention to every little detail, really doing what Charlotte talked about and navigating such intricate tonal shifts throughout, right? So you really feel like you are with those characters. My favorite scenes in the show are when Mimi is directing and she does a oneer and we're going down the hallway and we're sitting there at the monitors and you're holding your breath and you're just like, oh my God, let everybody get everything right. And it's, you know, what a joy to get to actually be on the other side of the camera witnessing Mimi do that work. But then when you actually see it on screen and you feel it and the music kicks in and you are like with these characters, I think it's so thrilling. And, you know, it's the thing that we all really try to do when we set out to make these television shows, right? Is to really take people on an adventure and make them think and make them feel and make them care about the characters.
The tension in those hallways is amazing. That's one of the first things we talk about. That's the first thing that comes to mind, is the tension all the way through in those hallways outside the dressing rooms is crazy. Lauren, what kind of you know, as you guys were starting the show and each season starting, what kind of atmosphere are you trying to create on set, and how is it for Charlotte and Mimi? How's it different from other projects that you've worked on, and do you felt like did you meet those goals that you were setting to have this be a different type of production?
I mean, I think that oh yes, you go, Mimi, you go.
No, you know, it's very interesting when you create a television show or a movie and you hire people who are really wonderful. You know, you hire people because you respect them and because they're good and because they're collaborators. And anyone who says that they do it by themselves is, I don't know, living on another planet.
Yeah, it's delusional.
Yes, it is a true collaboration. And, you know, we like to have fun and we like to tell our stories. And we like to find the truth, as is the theme of season 3. But we hire, you know, I like to run a set as a director, producer on respect. And that's what we do. We respect the people we work with. We love them. We're a family. And then we're creating this other family we are the family, but then it's the family on screen, and they're all interwoven. And what's the most wonderful thing to see and feel is when you're doing a scene and you look over there and there's this grip and he's crying or he's laughing and you go, oh my God, he's involved. He's not asleep. He's into it. All right, we're telling the right story. And it's just a very gratifying experience, that part of working on the show.
I so agree with you. The great victory is when our first AD will come by and go, that was a good scene.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I guess it was then. When Annie Berger says it's good, then
She tells the truth.
Maybe, yeah, she tells the truth.
Annie
And when she
Berger.
doesn't like something, she'll be like, okay, next one.
I was going to say, she's
So,
really
I love it. The crew is the ultimate litmus test. I think Mimi was absolutely right.
Yeah.
I also think, just going back to that initial question about setting the tone, I think for all of us, we knew this was a big show. It's a massive ensemble. The world that we have created, is really just incredibly expansive and really nuanced. And I think it was for us always about, as Mimi said, this is a team sport, and the team is everything. So, and certainly the phrase that, number one on the call sheet sets the tone. I think Reese and Jen set a really unbelievable tone of respect, commitment to the work, preparation, really taking it very seriously. And so we have a group of people. I mean, we've had really the same crew for all 3 seasons. And they're, just wonderful family members. I don't know whether it was Charlotte or Mimi that said the word family, but it really is that, and we've been through all of it together. Certainly I'll never forget that last day on set before we shut down for COVID, Mimi. I remember,
Yes.
I remember that location. I remember being there with you. I remember all the things, but I think we've been through so much together, and there's such pride in the collaboration and in the work. It's really a very special process, and a special environment to be a part of.
Yeah.
Do you think that part of the success of the show has also just been the increased, microscope on media holistically? I think, you tackle these amazing characters, but I think, over the past 3 years, there has been a huge microscope on media in terms of what is the truth, right? Do you feel that, in terms of the story arcs, that it's aligned with where the public, what people want to see, and, and they're curious, just because you don't often see shows around, or the narrative, obviously Brian is, he's give or take, obviously his departure from CNN, but, and his book, but you don't really get the inside look on media. Right. So I think it's like, is that something that you feel has given the show additional popularity, that people are curious, and beyond, obviously the characters and the depth that you bring to the bear?
I do feel like the online world, and even just the last, 5 or 6 years in politics, there has been a focus on, two people can watch the same news clip and have completely different, can describe it in completely different ways. So I think you're right. The question of like, what is the story? How is it that stories are constructed, that they're constructed with certain points of view? I think that awareness, or that, discussion about what is the real story, and is there a real story? Is it always just a version of, a different version? I think that has come to the fore in the last few years. Yeah. And certainly, obviously with just political events, that question and the part the media may or may not have played in, in how the public perceives an election, I think is, that's in the air, right? That's in the zeitgeist. So we are kind of touching that. Yeah, for sure. I think another great thing about the DNA of the show is that it doesn't really focus on red versus blue. It tries to sort of look at, okay, these are the people making the decisions about how we tell the story. Let's look at that, as opposed to, a sort of 30,000 foot political view, which I think nobody needs on their Saturday night,
It's
watching
interesting.
Great movie stars. So, yeah.
When you look at the two, I was just going to say, like, if you look at two of the most popular shows, it's the morning show and Succession, and they're both about media empires and media companies, obviously with different takes. But it's interesting that these two shows have, like, people gravitate towards them from a media perspective.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of really good drama in both shows and in both worlds. There's a lot of good drama. I was just going to say a fun piece of trivia. I think that Charlotte, she has many superpowers, but there's like a clairvoyance. And I think Carrie Erin had it too, but there's something unbelievably awesome about the ability of the writers of this show to anticipate sort of what's coming next, right? And what the conversation might be, to be watching the final episodes of this season in this moment is really, I just think how brilliant that our writers sort of had the foresight to know. I mean, obviously events in our world and in our country previously have sort of inspired a conversation around the subjectivity of truth and the power of the media in the stories that are being told. But I think this moment in particular, it is such a live conversation. And what a gift it is. Exactly, Charlotte, as you were saying, we do at Hello Sunshine, we talk about being a purple state company, because I think the point is really not to bring people into conflict, but rather to bring them into conversation. And I think this is a show that has the power to really challenge its audience and bring them into conversation. Like, that's the goal, right? Isn't that the gift if we actually made something that makes people think about things and talk about things with one another?
So beautifully put. And I also noticed that some of the, what we call the spicier things or the more difficult things that we did this year seem to resonate the most with audiences, and it's a good reminder of that people are they'll take the journey. They want to have that conversation. Like you say, Lauren, it's beautifully put. So it's a great reminder to a writer to never, be shy, about trying something really bold and potentially, uncomfortable for people.
Charlotte wanted to explore abortion rights, and we started to do it, and then Roe v. Wade was overturned. It just, like, witchy, It was great.
Yeah, and we didn't even know that the pills were going to be such a hot button point, and sort of whether you can mail them between states and all that. And I really I credit the team, like our researcher was like, I think the pills are going to be, I'm talking to these women on the ground, we do our research, we talk to people who are on, at ground zero dealing with these questions, and they kind of said, it's the pills are going to be next. So we put that in at episode 1, but we had no idea how relevant it was going to be, actually.
For all three of you, for your history, I want to talk a little bit more about your your history before this project and your careers before this project. But you all have really melded business and creativity, whether show running, whether writing, whether producing, and how do you balance that? How do you find a project, or you get introduced to a project and you decide, no, I don't want to be on the creative side of that. I want to, I want to executive produce, or I want to find the content and then turn that over. So how do you blend those two sides of your careers with each project?
Who's going first?
I feel like Lauren and Mimi take that question.
I'm happy to go first. I got the winning lottery ticket when I got a phone call asking if I was interested in working with Reese Witherspoon at her new company, Hello Sunshine. And that was almost 7 years ago. And, the rest is history. But I think really when it comes to blending the business and the creative, before I worked with Reese, almost exclusively, I worked on the buyer side at movie studios, at a television network. I was hearing all of these pitches and reading all of these scripts, and I was passing so often, but what I really learned was what it feels like and what it sounds like when something is extraordinary, when something is undeniable. And so in coming into this job, I had the opportunity to be working with a woman who is so brilliant and so confident, that it wasn't about gauging what is everybody else going to want from us, but really it was about, what do we want to make? What stories do we want to tell? What do we want to put out into the world? And for us, it was about putting women at the center of every story we told, and in unconventional ways showcasing those women as the heroes of their own stories. So it was sort of like, here's the mission statement, and then all the material was coming in, and it was about saying, a respectful no thank you to a lot of it, because we really wanted to put our whole focus and energy into the things that we felt were the projects we were, in love with and determined to get made. And I think, we've been able to do it, and it's been such a joy and such a privilege and such a pleasure to get to do it and to tell these stories that center on women. I can't think of anything better. So, the business part of it has really been great. I think because I was one of the people that was saying yes and no before, so I had a pretty good finger on the pulse of what people might be inclined to say yes or no to. But then the real question was, does Reese love it? Do I love it? Does our amazing team at Hello Sunshine love it? Is this a story we're passionate about telling? And if so, I think we really do have the hopeful belief that all of those stories will find the right home in the marketplace. And for the most part, they really have.
Yes, you
Lauren, I
have.
have to ask, how many books does the Hello Sunshine team read a week?
It's harder by the week. My guess
By
is
the
somewhere between 20 and 30 a week, probably.
Wow.
In terms of manuscripts and scripts, like in terms of pieces of material, the amount of material that comes into us is pretty mind blowing. But we have a team that loves the work, and so it's and the conversation that we have amongst ourselves is, the question that you ask yourself when you read something is, do I love it? And if the answer is yes, then we dive into the conversation completely and fully, and we all hands on deck, And if the answer is like, I like it, I don't love it, we're usually inclined to pass, because there will be someone who loves it, and that's the person that should be telling that story.
Right. So well said. I feel the same way, as a director and executive producer. I have to, there's so much time and sweat and that you put into a show, and whether it's a movie or a television show, and you have to really love it in order to say yes. And that is, is it a hell yeah? Then I do it. If it's not a hell yeah, I'm not going to do it. And, in terms of the business side and the creative side, I approach everything from a creative point of view. As an executive producer, there is a business side. And I remember early in my career on China Beach, John Wells was the producer, and, Carol Flint and Lydia Woodward, writers, wonderful writers. We were all producers, and it was the second job. I was a producer director, and I was the second person who had ever done that, because I had been directing episodic, and Greg Hoblet was my mentor and hired me, and he was the first person to ever have done it. And so, they hired me, and I was like, I'm this creative director. And John Wells said, get in here. And we got into a room, and he taught us how to budget a show. And so it was very important, this lesson. I learned how, to accrue budgets. I learned what to spend the money on. We all did. And it really translated beautifully to the writers who were writing. Like when Charlotte said, hey, we're doing space. You know what I mean? There's a budget attached to that. And of course, it's the creative first. And then it's like, how do we do it? Can we do it? And so that's my approach to deciding on what to do and how to do it. And, you integrate that with your life. You're spending a year, or, we've been doing the morning show for 5 years. And I'm like shocked by that, and we had, of course, a shutdown that added many months to that. Um, but it's really gratifying when you love it and the audience loves it. And seeing that and feeling that is is such a great reward, because you go, yes, I think I made the right decision, because why we make these shows and why we tell stories is to make people laugh. And the cliche, I want to cry, I want to feel something. And our show is about something. And I think it's really important for me to tell stories about something.
Just following up on that, there's a quote I love so much. I can't remember, somebody in the art world in LA in the 60s. He said, art is a way to love strangers. And I've always, that's right. That's what I think I'm trying to do, is to just reach out to, you tell a very specific story and you really hope that you're connecting with a lot of people. And that's really the goal, I think, deep down.
All right, so I'm just going to tell you briefly, and Lauren and Charlotte know this story, but I'm just going to tell it. So
I feel like a big spoiler alert.
we screened the Santa Barbara Film Festival invited us to screen the finale and did a Q&A with me about my career and the show. And I said, I don't want to just come for the Q&A. I want to watch it. I watched it with my husband and my sister and her husband and my manager, and we just, everybody was like, the audience was full, and I was like, wow, this is weird, because we've only had one premiere in the 5 years. The first season, second season was COVID, third season strike. So we haven't sat really with an audience at all. And all I can say is they were applauding at certain parts of the show. In the middle of the show, they were laughing, applauding in places I had no idea there would be this sort of, real visceral reaction to the show. And it was very exciting because it was such a surprise, because, when you do a feature, you do testing and you do sit in the theaters with a crowd and you get, oh, they like that. This works, that works. It's Charlotte and I and Lauren sitting in the editing room going, we're laughing, we're having a good time. But when you laugh at your own work, you're kind of like, uh-oh, no one's going to laugh at this.
Yes, exactly.
There's a real danger to that. And so it was very fulfilling last Friday in terms of the entire season. It felt like we had done something that meant something. I always go back to that. But, there's nothing like the participation of an audience to finish the story, to tell the whole story. If I'm not saying that right, but I think you know what I mean.
No, exactly. I think that's so true. I mean, I started in theater, and it's the thing I love most, is that just feeling the energy of people sharing a story together. I think because we are so like balkanized in our world now, and you can just live in your internet bubble, that when something does sort of move across different worlds, it's so satisfying. You're like, oh yes, we can do this. We can sit around a campfire and say, like, what is it to be human? Like, it's great. It can be a sexy New York penthouse campfire, but it's really all about the same thing.
And what was so interesting, just another kind of weird point, is that in making the show during COVID, the first COVID event, and we came back with no vaccines, and there we were, masked and, shields, and, telling stories are all about, our characters are all about connectivity. And it was kind of difficult because so is making the process. You're all over each other, grips, everyone's like leaning in and you're hugging and you're talking and it's passionate. And we had to keep our distance. And it was such a, mind bend, not being able to connect with our crew and really connect, with the actors. No, you can't hug me anymore. Sorry, don't touch me. and having our actors really connecting. I know this is a jumbled sort of mess of what I'm saying, but it's all about connectivity, and we've had our challenges.
you guys obviously have been, with this project, like Mimi said, for 5 years. You're busy on other projects, on things that you're doing in your businesses. What do your days look like? What's your decompression or your escape from your what's your downtime? What do you guys do for kind of self-care?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Sometimes self-care goes out the window, but it's actually, my family is a very, first and foremost, the biggest part of my life. And so when you work on a show, you're giving 1,000%. So what's left for your family? And so you really have to figure that out. And, my daughter is now a grown woman, married, child, brilliant writer, actor, but she has a whole life. Point is, when you're the mother of a very young child and you're putting all this into, as Lauren is, you're putting 1,000% in, and then how do you navigate your family? How do you let them in? I mean, I have so many pictures of my daughter asleep on sets when she was little. You just bring them with you. And, but so, what I do to get full up is, I spend it with my family and my grandchildren. And I love going to the movies, believe it or not. I don't get away from it. I can't get away from it. And it's a drug. I love sitting in the theater and the lights going out. It's like the first time every time. And so that's what I do. I try and balance it all. That's my that's my downtime.
We're big movie theater people too, Mimi.
Charlotte, what about you?
I will say it is very hard to it's very interesting because I'm sure, Mimi, you feel this way too, and Lauren as well. Like, I find a story, once you attach to a story, it's a little like Alien. It lives in your body. And once it's in there, it is very, I've actually never been pregnant, but maybe it's very similar. Like, it's very needy. It wants something at 3 a.m. It'll wake you up and be like, well, what about this? Don't do that. Shift it a little bit. So I do find it very hard to turn that off because it's just always scratching at me a little bit. I mean, I agree. It's also a delicious addiction, and I wouldn't want to get rid of it. So I find that things that help me the most are something that I just get out of my head completely. Like, I go to the gym or Pilates or something, and I just want someone to fry me, like I just want to be able to like stagger out and just not even be able to think anymore. And like dopamine has flooded me. And then as soon as it floods me, I'm like, let me think about that one scene. I'm always, maybe I could just get another joke in there. So I admit it's a bit all consuming, but I think I wouldn't have it any other way, on some level. So,
and I think I feel similarly. I would definitely describe my work as all consuming. I started this job when my daughter, I signed my contract when I was 8.5 months pregnant. Reese very excitedly hired me. We had our first meeting when I was 7 months pregnant. I signed my deal when I was 8.5 months pregnant. I took a full maternity leave because I said that was important to me, and Reese said it was important to her also. And then we started when my daughter was 3 months old. So I now have a little boy who's 11, and I have a little girl who is 6.5. The half is very important to her and to me. So, I was, Hello Sunshine was sort of my third kid in quick succession. And, I think it's interesting. There's a book called Fair Play that we worked on at Hello Sunshine with Eve Rodsky. And then there's this concept of unicorn space inside of it, where it's like, what is the space that's just for you, that fills your tank? Like, what is the thing that you do? And it was so funny because Eve was asking me about it as she was writing the book. And I said to her, is it like when I go to the outlet malls twice a year and I spend a day by myself just roaming through the stores? And she's like, that's not your unicorn space. Like, do you take a painting class? Do you do yoga? And I was like, no, I do none of that. Like, I work and I'm with my husband and my kids. And like, and she came back to me and she said, I kept thinking about it, and I think your unicorn space is your work. She said, I think that that's the thing that feeds you and energizes you, because if it didn't, you would have to look elsewhere. And so I do think, as Mimi was saying, every spare moment is spent with my kids and trying to really be present before the time flies by too quickly, which it really does. But I think it's like finding the magic in the work that we do and being able to do it. And I will also say, sneaking off occasionally for a quick manicure is a really good pick me up for anyone. Strong recommend. When you're like, I can't do it anymore, just go get a quick mani. Put a smile on your face. Sometimes that's a like, if you have to do something nice for yourself every now and again. That's a good one for me.
And I would also just add an equal partnership in marriage or non-marriage or just relationship, choosing wisely so that you have a partner that supports you, maybe even more than you support yourself. Someone who holds you up when you can no longer hold yourself up because you're too fatigued and you've put too much in, or it's just, life is connectivity. And whether with your children, with your partner, with your work, it's all one big thing. And it's really absolutely important to find the happiness in your life in order to give, as an artist.
I think that is right. Finding a person that can really lift you up when you find that it's hard to do it on your own is the greatest gift.
Yeah. I'd say also there's a real sisterhood on our show. It's run by women. It's, there's a couple of guys. No, I'm just saying it's a really big sisterhood. And I would say even the male who is our partner has a great feminine side, a real understanding of women. And because we are something. And it's just very different working with women. You're in a casting session. Well, when you used to have them in person and you sit there and actors walk in and they go, I've never seen so many women in a room in a casting session. They were like shook up, and it's a different vibe. And so we have a real shorthand, and that is so wonderful. I gotta say, it's the best.
I can only imagine how fantastic the end of like wrap parties or an end of a shooting is with all of those women. I see bottles of wine and some amazing laughs.
Absolutely.
Well, the last day of season 3 was the last scene of episode 10. So that was really an emotional day. And we were all sitting in Video Village together. It was really special.
It really was.
There were some tears. There were definitely some tears.
So many tears. Even from Annie Berger, our first AD. Tears.
I know. And she's a tough Chicago chick, I'll tell you. She shed some tears. It was great.
Is there anything you guys could share with us about what's coming next?
I guess I could say that we'll certainly play out the ramifications of what happens in the finale. That enough questions are raised at the end that it's like, how did this play out? Like, where are we going to see these people next? Because there's a fair amount of reshuffling. So it'll be interesting to see where are people, because we always have to do a rather large time jump to just not get too far behind in real life. So I think part of the fun of the show is, well, what happened while they were off screen? What happened between seasons? Sometimes it's a big secret. Sometimes it's not, sometimes someone's at the top of the ladder and they fall off and have to crawl back up, So I think we'll be really picking up essentially like emotionally from the last scene of season 3.
Ladies, we really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to speak with all of you. And we're excited for the finale.
And we
Thank you.
appreciate
Thanks for having us. And it's so fun to all do it together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
So nice
Thank you so
meeting
much,
all of you.
ladies.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womenandentertainment.com.